Why, sports reporters? Well, we got fallout from last night's victory, but all is not well in the Indiana Fever fandom community, particularly the Caitlin Clark community, because even though they got a win last night, you got a lot of people that are still not happy. And they're still not happy with the brand of basketball that this team plays and how Caitlin Clark is being used. By the way, boy, that pick and roll, come on. I mean, it's such an easy thing to run.
Did you hear what Stephanie White just said? The head coach of the Indiana Fever basically looked straight into the cameras, looked directly at the fans spending their hard-earned money to watch Caitlin Clark play, and told them to relax and stop complaining. Fans are fans for a reason, right? It sounded like a masterclass in how to frustrate an entire fan base overnight. What's going on, everybody? I'm Dre Fiber, and you're tapped into Street Hoops, the channel that keeps it raw and unfiltered. And today we need to talk about what might be the most confusing coaching situation in professional basketball right now. Because there's one reality the mainstream sports media keeps dancing around. The Indiana Fever have an $8 problem. Not $800, not $80, $8. And that number says way more than people realize. It's not just a cheap ticket price, it's the market speaking loud and clear about what this version of Fever basketball is actually worth to fans. Let's break it down. Multiple secondary ticket marketplaces, including Vivid Seats and TicketSmarter, showed Indiana Fever resale tickets dropping as low as $7 or $8 early in the 2026 season. Think about that for a second. This is still the Caitlin Clark era. The same Caitlin Clark who helped turn Indiana into the hottest ticket in the WNBA just 2 years ago. Back in 2024, the Fever led the league in home attendance, averaging more than 17,000 fans a night at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Same franchise, same superstar, same fan base, and now tickets are practically being handed away. It gets worse. During a recent road game against the Los Angeles Sparks at Crypto.com Arena, reports said the upper bowl wasn't even opened. Only around 12,000 seats out of nearly 19,000 were being used. That's not just a quiet night at the arena. That's a massive warning sign for the Fever organization. Now, to be fair, not all of this falls directly on Stephanie White. We're still early in the season, and fans are coming off a frustrating year where Caitlin Clark played only 13 games because of injuries. There's understandable concern about her health. Casual fans also take time to reconnect after a disappointing season. But here's the issue fans can't ignore. Stephanie White entered this season openly talking about taking the ball out of Caitlin Clark's hands. Not rumors, not speculation. Publicly. According to coverage from ESPN and multiple league outlets during Indiana's April Media Day, Clark herself explained that she expected to play more off the ball, especially after dealing with constant full-court pressure and the physical toll of bringing the ball up every possession. And honestly, that part makes sense. Protecting your star player after an injury year is smart basketball. But there's a huge difference between managing Caitlin Clark's workload and completely reshaping the offense so your biggest weapon barely controls the game. That's where Fever fans believe this has gone too far, because in that Sparks game, everyone watching saw exactly what happens when Clark is allowed to play her natural style. Early in the first quarter, she came out on fire. Indiana pushed the pace. The pick-and-roll game with Aaliyah Boston was clicking immediately. Clark was creating space. Boston was rolling hard to the rim, and the defense looked completely overwhelmed. Analysts have pointed out for months that the Clark-Boston two-player action is one of the most dangerous combinations in the league because it forces defenses into impossible decisions. And for a brief moment, the Fever looked exciting again. They looked fast. They looked confident. They looked like a team fans actually wanted to pay to see. Clark finished that game with 24 points and 9 assists, and Indiana walked away with an 87-78 win. On paper, that sounds like a strong night. Road victory, star player producing, team starts the season 2-0. Everything should feel positive, but that's not how fans felt watching it unfold. Because what people saw was a team that gave them a glimpse of something electric, then immediately pulled away from it. It felt like watching 90% of the meal get taken off the table before anyone could actually enjoy it. The second quarter arrived, and suddenly the pace slowed to a crawl. The pick-and-roll action disappeared. The aggressive downhill attack faded. And the extra pass philosophy Stephanie White has preached since taking over the team came creeping right back into the offense. By the fourth quarter, there were stretches where fans were genuinely asking themselves a simple question: is this offense actually designed around maximizing the best player in women's basketball? Or is everybody just improvising and hoping talent bails them out? And here's my personal take on it. Something is deeply wrong when your franchise superstar, the player responsible for filling arenas, driving ratings, and carrying the entire brand, has to fight her own system just to get clean looks at the basket. This frustration didn't appear overnight either. Back during the brief stretch in 2025 when Clark returned before her season-ending groin injury, fan reactions exploded after a loss to the Valkyries. According to Sports Illustrated coverage at the time, social media was flooded with criticism aimed directly at the coaching approach. One fan described the offense as an everybody-eats buffet that overcomplicated simple basketball and prevented Clark from getting into rhythm. Another fan summed it up even more directly: give Caitlin the ball, run ball screens, and let the defense panic. Simple idea, effective idea. Yet somehow fans feel like it's the one thing Indiana refuses to fully commit to. Now let's talk about Stephanie White herself, because this situation deserves more nuance than either side is giving it. Earlier this year, White appeared on ESPN Women's Sports Now and addressed the backlash surrounding her decision to move Clark off the ball more often. As reported by Athlon Sports, White explained that fans naturally want to see their favorite stars play the way they always have. She framed the situation as a difficult balancing act that most coaches never have to deal with, and technically, she's not wrong. There are valid basketball reasons behind some of these decisions. After Clark played only 13 games in 2025 because of multiple soft tissue injuries, there absolutely should be conversations about preserving her body. Clark herself admitted that handling full-court pressure every possession is exhausting over the course of a season. Wanting another ball handler to ease that burden makes sense. That's the reasonable version of this conversation. The problem is that fans believe the Fever have crossed the line from protecting Caitlin Clark into neutralizing Caitlin Clark. There's a massive difference between strategically using her off the ball in certain moments and building an entire offensive identity that limits the most dangerous creator in the league. And when fans complain about that, they feel like they're being told they simply don't understand basketball. That's where the frustration turns personal, because this isn't some impossible tactical puzzle. The Fever have one of the most explosive offensive pairings in the WNBA sitting right in front of them. Caitlin Clark is already one of the league's most dangerous pull-up shooters and one of its best playmakers. Aaliyah Boston is an elite screen-and-roll partner with touch around the rim, strong decision-making, and the ability to punish mismatches inside. When those two run pick-and-roll together, defenses are forced into impossible choices. Go under the screen, and Clark buries a three in your face. Trap her too aggressively, and Boston gets a free lane to the basket. Switch defenders, and now a smaller guard is trying to stop Boston in the paint. There is no perfect defensive answer, which is exactly why fans cannot understand why that action isn't the foundation of Indiana's offense every single night. Instead, too often, the offense drifts into endless ball movement that doesn't actually create advantages. Possessions become slower. Rotations feel disconnected, and the player who should be controlling the entire rhythm of the game sometimes feels reduced to just another option instead of the centerpiece. The criticism online has become relentless because of that disconnect. In reaction to recent games, fans across social media and comment sections have accused White of running outdated offensive concepts and refusing to fully lean into what makes Clark special. Some have even gone as far as calling for coaching changes already. And yes, some of the reactions are over the top. That's what passionate fan bases do. But exaggerated reactions usually come from real frustration. And right now, Indiana Fever fans are frustrated because they believe they're watching a team actively move away from the exact formula that made people fall in love with this franchise in the first place. And that frustration is showing up in the one place nobody can spin, explain away, or hide from: the ticket market. when secondary marketplaces like Vivid Seats are listing Indiana Fever tickets for as low as $8, and Ticket Smarter has seats floating around $11 for some matchups. That tells you something important. The market is talking, and markets don't care about excuses. They don't care about coaching philosophies. They don't care about media narratives. They don't care about injury management plans or long-term vision. Markets simply reflect what people believe a product is worth. Right now, a noticeable portion of the Caitlin Clark audience is looking at this version of Fever basketball and deciding they'd rather spend $8 somewhere else. That's the reality. Now let's talk about something else people keep quietly brushing past. Caitlin Clark's three-point shooting. Because if there's one sign that something bigger may be happening here, it's the fact that one of the greatest long-range shooters women's basketball has ever seen suddenly doesn't look fully like herself. Early 2026 numbers haven't been terrible, but they also haven't looked normal by Clark's standards. And yes, context matters. ESPN noted she was easing back into action after an injury-riddled 2025 season, with minutes restrictions and recovery management still part of the process. 2 games is not enough to make sweeping conclusions, but fans aren't just reacting to percentages. They're reacting to how she looks physically. For months now, there's been growing discussion around whether Clark is still dealing with lingering issues involving her hip, groin, and lower back areas. That concern didn't come out of nowhere. She played only 13 games last season because of repeated soft tissue injuries, and many fans trace the beginning of those problems back to the hard collision involving Marina Mabrey, the play where Clark took a violent fall that clearly shook her body up. Now saying a collision contributed to later injuries is not conspiracy thinking. That's a reasonable sports discussion. When an athlete absorbs major impact in a specific area and then continues having recurring problems connected to that same region, people are naturally going to ask questions. Even Stephanie White acknowledged part of this publicly. According to Chicago City sports coverage, White explained that the team has been working on Clark's biomechanics and body mechanics heading into this season. She pointed out that younger athletes can sometimes get away with imperfect movement patterns until injuries expose those weaknesses. That's actually a thoughtful and honest answer from White. But it also creates an even bigger question. If the organization knows Clark's body needed rebuilding after last season, and if Clark herself admits constantly bringing the ball up against full court pressure wears her down physically, then why does the offense still so often feel difficult for her instead of freeing her up? Why does it still look like she's fighting through traffic every possession instead of operating inside a system designed to maximize her strengths? Because when you zoom out, the stakes here are enormous. The Fever averaged over 17,000 fans per home game in 2024, the best attendance in the entire WNBA. That wasn't normal for this franchise before Caitlin Clark arrived. She transformed Indiana overnight from a struggling organization into the biggest attraction in women's basketball. TV ratings exploded. Sponsorship conversations changed. National media attention skyrocketed. The entire league shifted because one player walked into the WNBA with superstar-level gravity. And now, 2 years later, tickets are selling for $8. Not because Clark is absent. She's healthy enough to play. Not because the roster is weak. Indiana kept Aaliyah Boston, brought back Kelsey Mitchell, and added talent around the edges. Not because fans stopped caring about Caitlin Clark. The issue, according to a growing section of the fan base, is that the product on the court no longer feels aligned with what made this team exciting in the first place. Fans are watching a system that often slows the game down, spreads touches evenly, emphasizes ball movement over star control, and at times seems hesitant to fully unleash the most dynamic offensive player in the league. That criticism lands directly on the coaching staff, and specifically it lands on Stephanie White. Now, to be clear, this doesn't mean White is some villain. She's not sabotaging Caitlin Clark. In fact, there's strong evidence she genuinely cares about her player. White coached Indiana to a solid 24-20 record in 2025, despite Clark missing most of the season, and the Fever still made a deep playoff run that pushed the eventual champion Las Vegas Aces to 5 games. That's legitimate coaching success. She's also spoken compassionately about Clark publicly. Yahoo Sports quoted White saying she hates seeing Clark treated like a political football and emphasized that, at the end of the day, Clark is still just a young player who loves basketball. That matters, But caring about a player and maximizing a player are not always the same thing. And right now, the message from many Fever fans is becoming louder by the week. They're not saying Stephanie White is a bad coach or a bad person. They're saying she may simply be the wrong coach for this particular moment in basketball history because the style White prefers, controlled pace, equal opportunity offense, structured ball movement, may fundamentally clash with what Caitlin Clark is built to do at her best. Clark's appeal has always been chaos, speed, deep threes, relentless pick-and-roll pressure, the feeling that every possession could turn into something spectacular. Fans don't just want efficiency from her, they want electricity. And the growing fear around Indiana right now is that the system designed to protect her may also be slowly muting the very thing that made her a phenomenon in the first place. There's one final layer to this conversation that doesn't get discussed enough, and honestly, it might explain why so many Fever fans feel frustrated even during wins. It's the impact this entire off-ball experiment is having on Aaliyah Boston. Because while everybody is focused on Caitlin Clark, there's another star on this roster whose offensive role suddenly feels strangely disconnected from what she does best. Aaliyah Boston is not some role player standing in the corner waiting for scraps. She's a former Rookie of the Year, an all-star caliber big, and one of the most skilled interior players in the WNBA. She has touch around the rim, elite hands, strong footwork in the post, and the ability to stretch defenses in pick-and-pop situations. She should be a nightmare matchup every night. And yet, under this current system, there are long stretches where Boston feels almost offensively invisible. Yahoo Sports pointed out that during the 2025 season, when Clark was sidelined for most of the year, Boston stepped into a primary scoring role and thrived. She averaged around 15 points and more than 8 rebounds per game while carrying a huge portion of Indiana's offensive load. She proved she could anchor an offense. But now with the Fever trying to balance Clark's off-ball usage and a more spread-out, everybody-eats approach, Boston seems trapped in between identities. She's not consistently getting the two-player action with Clark that maximizes both of them. She's not receiving enough deep post touches to fully punish mismatches. Too often she ends up floating around the perimeter, touching the ball in spots where she can't really dominate, while possessions dissolve into endless passing and late clock improvisation. And that's the irony of this entire situation. The Fever may actually be running a system that minimizes the strengths of both of their best offensive players at the exact same time. Because almost every serious breakdown of Indiana's offense reaches the same conclusion. The Clark-Boston pick and roll is the most dangerous thing this team has. When Clark comes off the screen and forces defenders to chase her 30 feet from the basket, the defense immediately bends. If the defense traps, Boston slips free toward the rim. If defenders stay home on Boston, Clark has space to launch. If they switch, Boston gets a smaller defender in the paint. Every option creates pressure. Every option forces mistakes. And the crazy part is, this doesn't require some complicated offensive genius. It's actually simple basketball. It requires repetition, it requires trust, and it requires a coach willing to fully commit to what clearly works best. A coach willing to say, this is our identity. These two players together are our advantage. Lean into it. Right now, many fans don't believe Indiana's doing that. So where does all of this leave the Fever moving forward? Here's the reality. Indiana is not a bad basketball team. Caitlin Clark is not suddenly washed or broken. She's finally healthy after a brutal stretch of injuries, and even now she's still putting up major numbers. A 24-point, 9-assist road performance against Los Angeles is proof of that. ESPN's reporting on her offseason made it clear she attacked her recovery seriously and worked hard to rebuild her body for this year. The foundation of a championship contender is absolutely there. But the coaching concerns are real, and they're no longer coming only from random social media accounts yelling into the void. They're showing up in ticket prices. They're showing up in fan reactions. They're showing up in Clark's own visible frustration during interviews when she keeps getting asked to explain the same offensive questions over and over again. According to coverage of the backlash surrounding the team, many Fever fans believe Stephanie White's system simply does not match the moment. They see an offense that feels overly cautious, overly structured, and too hesitant to fully unleash the player who transformed the entire league's visibility. The important thing is that this story is not finished yet. We're still early in the 2026 season. Adjustments can happen, coaches evolve, rotations change, philosophies shift once the pressure starts building. There's still time for Indiana to lean harder into the Clark-Boston partnership and reshape the offense into something faster, freer, and more dangerous. And if that happens, the energy around this franchise could flip overnight because the Fever absolutely have the talent. Boston is elite. Kelsey Mitchell remains one of the league's best scorers. Clark is still the engine that drives national attention. The pieces are all there for a legitimate championship run if the coaching staff fully embraces what makes this team special instead of trying to smooth all the edges off it. Fans don't want perfection. They want identity. They want the speed, the chaos, the transition threes, the pick and roll pressure, the feeling that every possession could turn into a highlight. That's the version of the Fever people fell in love with. That's the version that packed arenas and changed the business of women's basketball. If Indiana gets back to that, those $8 tickets will disappear fast. But if the offense continues to feel slow, cautious, and disconnected by the middle of the season, then the ticket market may end up delivering the harshest verdict of all. Because eventually, fans stop arguing online and simply stop showing up.